Paper Fins here, about to embark on our long journey down this kaiju road. I'm not sure when it will end, but I hope you stick with it as we journey through Godzilla's lengthy history. From a symbol of atomic destruction, to a yearly monster brawler, to a loving father, to a protector of planet Earth. He'll star in films where he is either a plant-based life form who becomes the most powerful being on the planet, or in a movie where he is a really big iguana running around New York City, or in films about bureaucratic incompetence. We are going over everything here, so strap in and enjoy the series. Now, I'm writing this in the year 2025. By this point, a lot has clearly happened in the franchise. From the Big G getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, to one of the films winning an Academy Award. However, we must put all that aside for the time being. We need to start our journey by traveling back in a time period before Godzilla had a mechanical doppelganger or a so-called nephew, before he encountered superheroes, before he engaged in battles with King Kong, and before all the other madness began in these incredible tales. We have to return to Godzilla's home. Some may think that's either Monster Island or maybe the ocean itself. And while those answers aren't wrong, we need to go to Godzilla's real-world home, which is a Japanese motion picture firm called Toho. Today, Toho is considered the most well-known Japanese film company in the world, in part because it has distributed some of the most well-known anime movies of all time, including Akira, Your Name, and the Studio Ghibli movies, as well as the amazing Jiraigeki films, or period dramas, of Akira Kurosawa, which has given us classics like Yojimbo and Seven Samurai. But of course the company is well known for the Godzilla franchise, which is still going strong decades after the first movie was released in 1954. Now of course Toho didn't start out as the large film studio it is now, nor did it even have the name Toho. The business was founded in 1929 as Photochemical Laboratory, or PCL for short. PCL didn't distribute movies. Instead, the corporation was concentrating on developing cutting-edge recording technology for sound films, which were beginning to gain popularity in the motion picture business. In the mid-1930s, Ichizo Kobayashi, then chairman of an electric railway company, had bought PCL. Later, the company would merge with several other studios to become the Toho Film Company that we know today. Now, Toho did well for itself in its early years, but the business truly took off once World War II had begun. The production of propaganda films was heavily influenced by the active war order of the Japanese government. The government promoted its war efforts by providing an explanation for its military activities through the film industry. One of Toho's biggest movies at the time was a movie called The War at Sea, From Hawaii to Malay, which recreates the events of Japan's assault on the United States at Pearl Harbor and the attack on the Royal Navy flagship Prince of Wales and battlecruiser Repulse. Despite a lack of character development, the film's amazing effects and miniatures more than make up for it. The effects were so amazing for their time that people occasionally have trouble telling the difference between the real footage and the effects material. In fact, after the war ended, American occupying forces actually thought the Pearl Harbor attack scene was genuine combat footage taken during the attack. The effects were just that convincing. Although many individuals were involved in the creation of these intricate sets, a man by the name of Eiji Tsuburaya, who would become known as the godfather of Japanese special effects, or Tokusatsu, was the mastermind behind this trickery. Tsuburaya would go on to become a highly regarded and well-known special effects director for his time. Some people even believe that he is the sole reason that Godzilla, kaiju, and certain tokusatsu superhero genres even exist. Now, even though he genuinely enjoyed creating magic for motion pictures, it's difficult to imagine that the man's career in filmmaking was merely the result of a fortuitous encounter. Yoshiro Edamasa was a man Tsuburaya had met at a tea shop in 1919. Following a dispute between the two men's colleagues, Tsuburaya's composure as the fight broke out impressed Edamasa, who volunteered to teach him to become a cameraman. Given that Edamasa would later direct The Great Buddha Arrival in 1934, often regarded as the first Daikaiju film, it's intriguing that Edamasa of all people trained Tsuburaya. However, as previously established, Edamasa was training Tsuburaya as a cameraman rather than an effects technician. But because of this, Tsuburaya would eventually pick up on a lot of in-camera effects techniques. He would learn all of this on his own by experimenting with different lighting methods, live in-camera tricks, glass paintings, screen projection effects, and even double exposure. These techniques undoubtedly contributed to his passion for effects work. But one magical movie he saw in 1933 fundamentally altered his viewpoint on filmmaking. That magnificent movie was King Kong. Not only did the film completely pique Tsuburaya's interest in special effects, but it also inspired him to create his own epic monster movie in the style of King Kong. Although Tsuburaya may not have been able to work on a film like King Kong anytime soon, he still honed his craft to create what were known in Japan at the time as trick pictures, because such films were unfortunately undesirable amongst Japanese filmmakers who believed that they were fairly misleading to audiences. An executive at Toho named Iwa Mori was one individual who saw the potential in Tsuburaya's efforts, and after meeting Tsuburaya at Toho, Mori agreed with his suggestion that the studio establish a special effects division, and in November of 1938, Toho had just that. Now, even though Tsuburaya was the sole employee of the newly formed sector, his team would eventually come together soon. Using miniature work and all of the camera tricks he had learned over the years as a cinematographer, Tsuburaya and his team of technicians started producing war propaganda films for Toho after World War II began, working on movies like Dawn of Freedom, The Decisive Battle in the Sky, and the previously mentioned War at Sea, amongst others. Even after the war ended, Tsuburaya kept using miniature effects for many of Toho's films, but the vision of a monster story akin to King Kong still remained in the back of his mind. Now, in regards to King Kong, the Terrifying Apes epic adventure film was re-released in the United States in 1952. Daiei Pictures later took over the distribution rights of the film in Japan the following year, and the film was a huge box office hit at the time, surpassing its previous performances. Tsuburaya probably had Kong on his mind at the time, since in the spring of 1952, he would propose the idea of a giant leg-bearing whale monster rising from the ocean and attacking Tokyo. If the film had been made, it would have been a very ambitious project for its time. Unfortunately, it was an idea that never got past its premise. At the beginning of 1954, Toho desired to begin working on their own grandiose project. No, not you yet. Prior to working on their Strange Beast film, Toho had desired to collaborate with an Indonesian film studio called Perfini on a movie titled Eko no Kage ni, which translates to In the Shadow of Glory. The protagonist of the tale is a former Japanese soldier who, after the war, battles alongside the Indonesians for independence from the Dutch Empire, which tried to regain its colonial dominance. Singer Yoshiko Yamaguchi and renowned actor Ryo Ikebe were both set to star in the film. An entire script was written, with Senkichi Taniguchi set to direct the picture, which was set to be filmed in Indonesia. The movie was supposed to be Toho's major project of the year. It was meant to bridge the divide between the two countries after the war, while also providing an exciting epic war drama that would have been filmed in color. Had the film got made, it would have marked a big accomplishment for Toho. Even though the production appeared to be proceeding smoothly, the Indonesian government simply refused to permit it. Anti-Japanese sentiments in Indonesia hindered the movie by prohibiting the Japanese filmmakers' visas from being granted. The nation still harbored resentment towards the Japanese for their actions against the country during the war. This move left Toho in a panic. Their major project was in danger of being cancelled, and it would cause a significant void for the company's releases for the year. The film's producer, Tomoyuki Tanaka, was responsible for trying to save it. He traveled to Indonesia to convince the studio in any way to help salvage the picture. His actions and words, however, were unable to save the film. In the Shadow of Glory had been officially cancelled. Tanaka was understandably frustrated, but he understood that his emotions wouldn't make up for the gap the project had now created at his job. Therefore, he had to think of a new film concept. However, he had to come up with one immediately because of all the time wasted on the failed co-production. Now, this is where the beginnings of the Big G start to show, or at least that's how several sources claim the following tale goes. While traveling back to Japan from Jakarta, Tanaka was under pressure to find a substitute film to replace the cancelled project. It was in a Japanese trade magazine that Tanaka discovered the American monster movie The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms tells the tale of the Rhedosaurus, a massive dinosaur that was awakened by atomic testing in Antarctica, and goes on a rampage in New York City. Both The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and King Kong's widely popular re-release in 1952 demonstrated that audiences desired more big beasts on the big screen, and showed that giant monster movies were moneymakers. Furthermore, the reference to atomic testing in Beast possibly could have brought to mind in Tanaka the Lucky Dragon No. 5, a fishing vessel that was recently contaminated by radioactive fallout from the US Castle Bravo H-bomb test at Bikini Atoll, an incident that was making national headlines. With all these ideas stirring up in his head, Tanaka soon came up with a concept that was similar to Beast, in which a huge marine monster terrorizes Japan after being awakened by an H-bomb explosion in the South Pacific, combining aspects of the Lucky Dragon incident with that of the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. He even had a title for the project, The Giant Monster from 20,000 Miles Under the Sea. Now, although Tanaka had the idea ready, he was still frantically trying to figure out how to make such a movie. At this moment, he decided it was worth taking a gamble, and after returning to Toho, he discussed the idea with executive producer Iwa Omori to help determine the viability of Tanaka's monster movie. Mori himself was equally perplexed about the idea. While Japan has previously produced a number of creature films in the past, none of them could exactly match Tanaka's vision. The successful re-release of King Kong in Japan the year prior might have convinced the men to take a chance on the project, given Kong is really the only other film they could compare the project to. Despite his curiosity, Mori knew that there was only one man at the company who could decide whether or not the film could even be produced. That man was Eiji Tsuburaya. Tsuburaya and Tanaka met shortly after to talk about the project, and Tsuburaya was excited to finally have the opportunity to work on a monster movie like King Kong. With Tsuburaya's word that such a movie could be made, Mori accepted Tanaka's monster story. After approving the concept, it was time to set up a team who could work on the movie, develop the story, and of course, design the giant's appearance. The title was also renamed The Giant from 20,000 Miles Under the Sea to, ironically, Project G. The G stood for giant, with the project being worked on in secret. Tomoyuki Tanaka sought the help of famed science fiction author Shigeru Kayama to develop a story treatment about a large monster. Tanaka had mostly picked Kayama because of his fascination with enigmatic animals and mutant marine life in his stories. Though Kayama was initially apprehensive about the idea, Kayama though would eventually show interest in the project and rose to the task of writing a gripping monster tale. When it came time to choose a director, Tanaka and Mori felt that it was appropriate to choose Senkichi Taniguchi, considering the monster film as a replacement to In the Shadow of Glory, which Taniguchi was originally supposed to work on. However, Taniguchi declined to work on such an absurd project, and had already moved on to another film, The Sound of Waves. Other directors were given the opportunity, but turned it down as well. One man who would step up to direct the film was Eshiro Honda. Honda seemed like the ideal choice for the project, given both him and Tsuburaya do have history together working on prior films from the past. However, even he was apprehensive about it, because he had no idea what the enormous monster even was. In fact, nobody knew what it actually looked like at first, except from the notion that it was thought to be a marine animal. So it was time to come up with some ideas. Tsuburaya suggested a huge mutant octopus, since he had a story idea from the past about a giant octopus wreaking havoc on Japanese fishing boats in the Indian Ocean. Tanaka had considered it and reluctantly accepted the monstrous octopus. However, given it some thought, Tanaka decided that the octopus concept was probably not the best course of action for the project, feeling that an oversized octopus wouldn't be the most appealing creature for audiences. And since they were more aquatic than terrestrial, the cephalopod attacking Tokyo seemed a tad far-fetched to the producer. Tsuburaya agreed with Tanaka's complaints, and the giant octopus was scrapped. Even though it wasn't made for this film, Tsuburaya's massive octopus would eventually appear in later projects down the road. Shigeru Kayama recommended Kazuyoshi Abe, a well-known manga artist who had contributed illustrations to some of Kayama's previous works. Abe had designed one of the first known concept art pieces for the beast, a mammal-looking creature with a head design meant to mimic the mushroom cloud of an atomic bomb explosion. Although it had a very unsettling appearance, it was ultimately rejected. Kayama had considered giving the creature large floppy ears, but the idea was dropped in the final design. What was the final design? Well, you all know what it is. But that design choice came from Tanaka, who had thought to make the creature a fictional dinosaur, likely drawing influence from the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. The creature's design had been supervised by art director Akira Watanabe, who wanted the creature's design to be more practical rather than outlandish. Watanabe and his staff took inspiration from a Life magazine article about dinosaurs. A combination of various creatures resulted in the final design, such as Stenik Burion's illustration of an iguanodon and Rudolf Zellinger's Tyrannosaurus Rex from the Age of Reptiles mural, in addition to giving the creature Stegosaurus backplates to help give it a unique appearance. And by the end of June, the atomic dinosaur's final design had been established, with the mighty beast even receiving the name Gojira.